I'll let you take it away, John.
So, hi, I'm Joe Guadagno from Rocket Mortgage. I am what we call a director here. I lead 4 different teams in our what we call fee services. So most of you probably haven't gotten a mortgage, but you might have gotten a car or have a credit card bill. There's a bunch of fees at the bottom. That's what my team does. We pretty much generate the revenue for our organization. I have with me here today another fellow director in Rocket Mortgage. I'll have John introduce himself since he knows better about himself than I do. Ron's going to be doing most of the talking, then we'll be around later for any questions. Where is yours, John?
Oh, okay. So we go from here or just say hi? How do you want to do this, Joe?
You can say hi and go into your presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, cool. All right. Hello, everybody. So my name is John Carr. I am one of the leaders at Rocket Central. So a lot of you might know us as Quicken Loans, as Joe said, right? And so what they did a couple of years back is they took a lot of the shared functions across they have a bunch of family companies, and they moved into one company called Rocket Central. But one of the companies that we deal with all the time is what used to be Quicken Loans, now called Rocket Mortgage. So may know us as that. And so it's kind of interesting because now instead of doing security for really one company or 2 companies, now we're doing it for 12 companies all at once. There's a lot of stuff there. So, a bunch of things to talk about today around security. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to you because I found out about this a little bit ago as Joe had mentioned it to me, and I went, holy crap, this sounds amazing. And it's interesting because Joe talked about this right before everything started happening in Eastern Europe, which is interesting because there is so much now that is happening surrounding the information security space and stuff there. I'm not going to touch on it a whole lot, but it's just interesting because the world that I work in intersects with that world so much. Because the effects in one place kind of affect other things, being, the company that I work for right now is part of the financial system in the US. And so there's been all these, concerns, right, about what happens. And so I definitely want to share a lot of that with you and how that works. So what I can say out of the gate. So I love tech. I love security. I've been doing it for a long time. I'll go into that in a little bit. But I know that the most value for most of you who are looking to maybe get into security is definitely in the questions and answer area. So I'll talk at you for a little bit and tell you just the world as I see it. But then after that, I would love to just get pummeled with questions and talk about that because really in the end, I think that's probably what the most value is. So what I'll do is I'll kind of run through security in general, the world. If y'all say, hey, this is stuff that we know, or, I would love to, jump ahead and talk about blah, I'm more happy to do that too, right? So I can jump in and start from there. So everyone good with that? A+? Okay, cool. All right, so let me share what I got here. Hold on, so I'll get my slides up. Okay, so can everyone see that? Okay, cool. So you see the PowerPoint? Okay, cool. All right, so anyway, I couldn't think of a better title for this. I will admit out of the gate, I'm a nerd, which means visuals are not my thing at all. I am totally a tech nerd that types things and all that, making things look pretty. I'm not there. So I'll admit that out of the gate. I'll apologize. So here's what I want to go through today. So the kind of things I want to talk about in this, the different areas of security, the paths on how to get into it. When I say security, I'm talking about information security, or a lot of people like to call it cybersecurity. I like information security better because it's more specific in a lot of ways. How I got into it, and then trying to figure out what you like, and as you're looking into this world, this sounds amazing. How do we get there? What figuring that part out, and also as employers, as a hiring manager, what do they like? What do the day-to-day look like? And the next steps for you, and then that's where we will just jump right into questions. So, who am I? All right. So like I mentioned, my official title is Director of Information Security, which is a lofty title. Titles don't mean a whole lot, right? It just means that I have leaders under me and I lead the leaders, right? But overall, I've been in IT and security about 30 years, as you can tell by the gray hair, right? But I kind of took an unconventional path getting here. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But, I started out in retail like everybody else, right? I was a sysadmin for a long time. And by sysadmin, I mean I ran systems and I did things like that. I worked for a couple of startups. And I did kind of a mix of IT and security for a long time. I'll bounce back and forth throughout my career. And the thing is that IT is security and security is IT. I mean, they're very different, but they're also very much the same. But I went into leadership about 10 years, but as a doer for about 20 years. And so I still have, I mean, a lot of times like Joe has been on meetings with me. If I'm doing this for my basement, because I'm in Michigan, so we have basements, right? If I was doing this for my basement, I've got a whole pile of old computers behind me typically. It's just, I'm a nerd. It's what I do. And so even though I lead people during the day, I still nerd out at night. It's what I do, right? So that's who I am. So I want to talk a little bit about like the different areas of security. And I say this because I think a lot of you, if you have been through any classes and talk about stuff, things like that, there's a lot of bits and pieces, right? It used to be like when I first got into it, if you did security, you kind of ran the gamut. Now there's a lot. And like here's a graphic I picked up from the internet. This kind of shows a lot of different domains. When I say domains, these could be different areas you could specialize in or different areas of knowing, stuff like that. And I don't know if you could see it super well because it can be kind of small, but this graphic it shows a lot of it, right? On the left-hand side, things like incident response, like finding the bad guy, right? Or responding when the bad guy starts doing bad things. The upper, or as I said, right, I'm in the left-hand side, I'm sorry. Upper left, a security architecture, how you design things so it's already secure by default. On the right-hand side, things like risk and like, how do you assess whether or not things actually are risky to start with? Or like lower right, things like governance and audit and like, and for a lot of people, they go, oh, that's terrible. For a lot of people, they love that. That's the rules. That's the rules by which things like the architecture team has to live by and everyone has to live by, things like that, right? And then as you get towards the bottom, threat intelligence, things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces and parts to it. So I was poking around the internet because I was trying to find a really good way of being able to express like, if you have these kinds of qualities, you might fall into different things. And so I have some of the graphics there, but some things I want to kind of before I lead into it a little bit is when you're thinking about security in general, I have found that different personality types fit in different areas. And like, because a lot of people might go like, I don't even know if I'm into security. I don't know if this is really something I'm interested in, right? But this is like one of the tests I take for myself, right? I don't know if y'all are into video games at all. I somewhat am. Before I had kids and everything, I played a lot more. I don't as much now, but I know like one thing that drives my wife crazy. If I play something with her, first thing I do, if it's a driving game, what's the first thing I do every time? I drive backwards on the track and I try to explore out to the edges of the track and figure out what happens if I go the wrong way. It's just my natural inclination. I'm not trying to break things. I just think it's hilarious going the wrong way and just seeing if I discover bugs. That's my mental nature. I'm a jerk about it. Like my wife, it drives my wife crazy. She was like, why can't you just play a game normal? It's just how I am, right? For a lot of people who are like this, and I know a lot of people who are, sometimes like that's the kind of mindset that gets you towards security because you're kind of like, how can I break something? Like there's this thing, it's supposed to do this thing. How do I make it do something it's not supposed to do? That's where my mind is most of the time. Like there's a set of rules. How do I take those set of rules and kind of bend them to my will? It's where my mind has been since I've been like, 7 years old, right? And so that's a lot of times if you're in those mindsets, a lot of times that's what gets you towards security, right? Now, a lot of people think like, oh, well, security, that means like you're breaking into systems, like that. It can be. There's a lot of things that may not be. If you love doing research, that might mean you might looking for the bad guy, right? If you love, let's say, finance and numbers and stuff like that and rules, you might be fantastic of like governance, compliance, things like that, and helping people make sure they're doing the right thing. But if on the finance side, if you love just like poking around in the numbers, you might find yourself like, doing a different part of that, right? There's so many different pieces to it. So, all right. So the things I was talking about that I found that kind of describe this even better than I can in a lot of ways. Like, for example, if you're a problem solver mindset, if you love finding things like vulnerabilities in systems and like your building systems like that, like, the path you might want to take within security, you might find yourself going towards, let's say, incident responder. As an example, let's say you're a quick learner and you're really quick on these things, but you love big picture thinking. You love trying to figure out, instead of like the tactical little pieces of tech, you go like, I love kind of figure out how does all those pieces kind of work together into one large thing. And that's why the graphics got a puzzle, right? Security architect might be the path you want to go down because you might be that big picture thinker who likes systems in how everything works together. Or like, as mentioned here, the Avenger, right? These are the people that love playing around in the tech. Like this is the people that love like, and you might find yourself like, even if you're using your own PC or something like that, messing around with the programs, like trying to figure out how things work, stuff like that. And then this basically, these engineers are the software people that build the software or configure the software that the other teams are using to find the bad guy. Or there are like the teacher. So this is a world that I came from at one point in my career as a consultant, right? There's some folks who love going into a company, being the sniper for like 2 weeks or something, like trying to get things worked out for a company where they're deficient, and then you're out, right? But you love that thing of like something new every time, but you know your stuff and you know you can help another company out or help the team out. That's an area. Or the enthusiast. This is what I was talking about, like the person likes to break things. So when people talk about security, a lot of times they talk about hacking. I want to hack into things. I want to be the hacker. I want to wear the hoodie, all those things, right? And I make the joke, but we all know the stereotype, right? That's the penetration tester. That's the person that breaks into things to find the issues that other people in the company may not know about. And so that's what that part is all about. But a lot of this really comes back to understanding the things that you love to do. Or if you don't know yet, just figure out what your personality type is. And maybe that'll help swing you in that direction. And again, I've got some, story about that I can talk about a little bit later too, of, someone who's on the team. Or, well, I mean, I don't know, I can even talk about it now, but like as an example, there's a guy who used to be on my team, and he is one of the smartest guys I know. He desperately wanted to get in the technical side. He did this for years, and he was on our side. He was what we call the SOC analyst. SOC means Security Operations Center, and he was one of the folks that would try to look for the bad guy, things like that. And he always wanted to get more technical. But he came from banking, because this was the company I work for now, right? So he came from the banking side, so he helped with like selling loans, things like that. He was a people person. He loved talking to people, all this. But the thing that he did the best was looking for the bad guy in very methodical ways. And while he kept on trying to get more technical, we kept telling him like, dude, like, I don't know if you realize, but you are doing these very methodical things on a consistent basis all the time. You really would be amazing at auditing. And he goes, no, I want to be technical. I want to be technical. So he kept on trying, banging his head against the wall on the technical side, wasn't getting there. And about 3 or 4 years later, he finally figured out like, oh, I really love auditing. I love going out there and doing auditing. He figured this out on his own finally. And now he's the team lead, which what we call team lead means manager, of a bunch of auditors within the company, because he realized like he loves rules and making sure that things are working there. And he would look at something, and if he looked at the same thing the 400th time, he would give it the exact same amount of mental, whatever, that he would give it the first time, right? He didn't get tired and his eyes didn't glaze over. And so it's just a matter of like understanding who you are and what you are, right? So there are some myths within security. And I mention this because a lot of folks don't realize, and I will run through these. Like if you're going to get into information security, a thing that will hold people back, they'll make people nervous. I could never do this. I could never do this because I'm not the type of person, right? Here's some myths. You got to hack things. As you saw in that great big graph, there is so much to security that does not involve hacking. But for a lot of people, they want to do that. That's fine, right? But people might go, oh, but I'm not smart enough for that, or which is not true, right? Because none of us are any smarter than anybody else, right? We just happen to specialize. But you don't have to hack things. One of the biggest ones I get all the time, you need all this math. I can't tell you the last time I had to do something more than add in my job. And luckily, I've got Excel, and Microsoft Excel will do everything else for me. I don't need to know any math. So math is off the table. You don't have to worry about that. All right, I need to get a master's degree. So I will go into this a little bit further with some people that I have known, but there are a lot of people who are in security who never went to college. So you do not need the master's degree at all. Only super nerds can do it. Not true, especially we talk about those areas where like maybe you're talking about, let's say, architecture, or you know, like governance, compliance, things like that. Like you don't have to be a super nerd. You just have to understand how pieces work together to build systems. And I say systems meaning processes, right? You need to be an IT master. Not necessarily true either. You need to own a lot of hoodies. I don't know if that myth is busted. It doesn't hurt to have a lot of hoodies, though, especially if you're sitting around the basement and it's like, midnight and it's cold down there. Hoodies help, right? You need to have a military or a police background. So not true either, right? Or in Detroit, yeah, because we just got out of our winter here and I was working out in my basement because of COVID. I had like double hoodies on. So yeah, you're right, Joe. Military police background. No, you don't need that. Or you need to be the neighbor's kid. And I'm talking about this because like everybody's got that one neighbor's kid who's like the smartest guy in the block and he's helping everyone's desktops and fix everything out. You don't need to be that either, right? the good and the bad thing about security folks is they get the bad rap for like, oh my gosh, they're so shady and they're working on these things and they're just super nerds. And we're not, right? We are nerds just like any other IT people, right? But we're not special in any way. But here's the cool thing for all of you who are looking to get into it. I was gonna mention this at the beginning and I kind of forgot. The current stat I heard, and I don't know if this is still true because this is about a 2-year-old stat, but last I heard, there are 2 security jobs for every person in security. In Europe, it's 3 to 1. There are not enough security people at all. There is a desperate need for security. And like I said, I've been doing this for like 20 or 30 years. And like we're out in the market trying to hire people and they just don't exist. It's not so much that, like we're having trouble finding all the right people. They don't exist. Every company is fighting over the same people. So what you see are people job jumping like once a year because there's all these great opportunities available because there's more jobs than there are people. So there are so many opportunities if you apply yourself. I don't want you to think like, oh, you gotta be such a nerd. Like as a hiring manager, desperately want people. We need them, right? So that's the thing there. So I want to talk a little bit about the paths to security. I just saw the thing about math. Okay, it's funny, Gordon. Okay, so yes, you're absolutely right. So what? 0.3333 bar percent of 33% of the jobs. I can't remember. Either way, okay. So like I said, I don't do math anymore, so it's not my job. So there's a bunch of different paths to security, right? There is college. There are internships. You hear about this stuff all the time, right? Military training. I have a couple of folks on my team that went through the military and not because of GI Bill, just what they were doing at school in the military, got them enough knowledge that they knew how to crawl so they could run when they got out of the military, or an existing job where they already work. They're already doing some sort of audit related field or IT or something like that. Those are traditional ways you get into security. There are the non-traditional ways. There's hustle, right? Like going a little bit like my history, like I got into IT because I worked in the mall and I was handing out business cards to everybody, trying to get like a little bit of like basically at the time, a side hustle of like getting some experience of working on things on the side. And granted, I could have gotten fired for doing it because I shouldn't have been doing that during my day job, but that's how I got a lot of my experience. There's things like open source projects. If there is a huge community, if you've not seen it before, in the world of like all these software packages that people develop for free. You can use them for free. People work on them in their own time, desperately need help. That doesn't mean you need to be a coder. A lot of times what they need are people who can, if you know multiple languages, who can translate, let's say something from English to Spanish, English to French, English to languages, right? To write documentation. Because one thing the IT people are terrible at is documentation. Anyone can help write documentation is huge, right? All these different areas. Well, where does that help out on your resume? So yeah, you may not have a traditional job you can say there, but you can talk about all these projects you're working on. That's huge. Volunteer groups, they got computers, right? Church, they got computers. I mentioned security conferences. There are all these security conferences. And that's one really cool thing about the security community compared to like a lot of like IT communities. Most of the conferences are free, absolutely free. They're in your area, or you can travel 2 to 3 hours to get there. And if not free, they're like $50. There's something called security B-sides, means that they're beside another larger conference and they're free to go to. And it's full of hundreds of other security people. And they have talks and there's gatherings, things like that, to just hang out and be immersed in it. You may not understand anything that's going on, you're immersed in it and you talk to people, right? There's hackathons. If you've got a little bit of technical knowledge or can do a little bit of coding, you can meet people just going to these things, these 24-hour hackathons. You can build something for charity, things like that, or bug bounties. If you know a bit about how to hack into stuff, these are huge. These are things that, and a lot of the big companies have these now, where you can go to their website and they say on there, hack our website. And if you do, we'll give you $500 as long as you send us what you did to get in there. So as long as it's sanctioned, that's a way to build a little bit of cred, a little bit of notoriety. Again, goes on that resume, because a lot of folks go like, okay, I just graduated college or I just graduated internship. I got nothing on my resume except for like my old jobs, or I worked in the mall, or my previous career because I changed careers. Like I got nothing IT related. Sometimes your foot in the door is showing all this other stuff you were doing. That can be humongous. So my path to security, here's how I got in, because a lot of people go like, okay, that's great, but how did you do it? Because everyone's got their own path. It's different for everybody, right? So I'm going to show these. I don't think Joe has not seen these. Neither has anyone at work. So Joe, if you take screenshots, I will kill you, for the record. So that's me. This is 5th grade, sitting across from who is still my best friend, Laura. This is me in 5th grade, so I lived in a small town in the South. I'm originally from Michigan. We moved down to a retirement village in Florida when I was in 4th grade. So this was me in 5th grade. So my dad, who did kind of a laborer, he was like the janitor of my high school, things like that, understood where the world was going. And I still have no idea how he did it, but bought this computer and handed it to me and basically said, in grade 10, I was, 10, I don't remember the story very well now, but basically what he said is, I never learned how to do much of anything. Don't be me. Learn this thing. My dad was severely dyslexic. He could barely read. He's left-handed, which doesn't mean anything now. But my parents had me when they were in their 40s. He was a child of the 30s. How they dealt with dyslexia, or if you were left-handed, they tied your left hand behind your back. They made you learn how to use your right hand. If you're dyslexic, they basically told you were stupid, and they did not make any accommodations. So he was told his whole life he was stupid, and he believed it. And so he did not try in any way to advance himself, but he knew where the world was going. And he saw this computer thing and he handed it to me and said, learn this. I didn't listen to him. Like I used it, I wanted Atari, I wanted like a game system. I got this computer, it was boring, right? So I played with it here and there, right? So high school, like senior picture. So at this point, I've been using computers for a long time. Doing a lot of things that were not necessarily legal with it, because you could get away with that stuff because you're in a rural community and no one knew anything about anything. There was also no one I knew with computers. And so, there's another lovely one of me, my senior year as well, right? So this was me. So graduate high school. During this time, I also worked in radio. I started off in radio. I started off because I'm extremely shy, which I know is hard to believe based on this, right? I am incredibly introverted, super shy, but I always want to be famous. So the best way of being famous is have no one see you. And so I want to be in radio. So I worked at a radio station for a short time, wanted to stay in radio, and found I hated working in radio. I didn't have a backup plan. I wanted to do this since I was 5 years old. I had no backup plan, but I had this hobby. So I moved up to Michigan. I work in a mall. And like I mentioned, I'm working in the mall, a computer store, and I'm handing out business cards everywhere. The nice thing about working in retail is no matter how shy you are, they make you talk to people or you don't get paid and you get fired. So I had to talk to people. And so that was part of my job, was doing that. But I want to do computers, I want to do that. So did a lot of side hustles, a pile of side hustles. So I'm working 40 hours a week. I am, handing out business cards. I'm going to people's houses, some rich people's houses, and working on their computers and helping them out with stuff and things like that. I'm able to then, parlay that into like knowing a person who knows a person. I got my first real job. And that got me into a startup later on. And so basically balancing between like IT and security, I spent 10 years on planes, effectively as a consultant. So flying out Monday, flying home Friday, new city every week. It was amazing. It was fantastic. It was basically the company was paying for a new vacation every week. I go to some place, I had to be somewhere 8 hours a day, but otherwise I'm in hotels, like in cities I've never would go to otherwise, all this amazing stuff, right? And eventually landed at Quicken Loans. Been here for like 15 years, did not intend to stay this long. It's an amazing company, but you never know what's going to happen. Didn't plan it, so what happened, right? So there's part of my story there that's missing. I don't know if you caught it. There's no college. Couldn't afford it. Didn't intend to go. I thought I was going to be in radio. Did absolutely nothing to prepare for college. I didn't apply for scholarships. I didn't really apply myself in school. I just had this hobby that I did on the side. And when I say hobby, I lived in a retirement town. I had almost no one my age that I hung out with that knew anything about computers. Didn't have a whole lot of friends. You can see the pictures. Wasn't a very attractive kid, right? Not hanging out with people. Basically sitting around in my room, working on computers all day, on my modem at the time, on what was the pre-internet, doing stuff all day. That was my college. That's all I had. And then I hustled. I'm mentioning this because for a lot of us here, this is a turning point in our career. Either we're changing careers or we're doing something new or we're not sure what to do, right? And I'm mentioning that not because I am this glorious person, I hustled really hard and blah, blah. It's more like what I'm saying is that anyone can do it if they apply. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't have a game plan. I had nothing. I just had to feed myself. I moved to a different state and did not have a fallback plan. Parents were poor. I didn't have a fallback plan. I just hustled. And I learned I'm figuring crap out on my computer during the night, and then I'm figuring out stuff during the day and making some money and things like that. And it was not a plan, but eventually it coalesced into a plan. And that's why I love to talk about this stuff, because it's where you get a lot of people in it who end up like $70,000 in debt because they went to college, things like that. And it doesn't always have to work out like that. For some people, it does, because that worked out really well. They have a great network, a great Rolodex. For other folks, they can't, right? Or they screwed up like I did, right? But yet you get there. So that's why I'm mentioning it, because it's such a big deal to me for people to realize you don't have to be the stereotypical nerd, quote unquote, to get into security or even IT, because there is no path. And that world has changed a lot, even the time I've been around, where you can not go to college and get these things, where now you should do it. And I'm saying, and I'm going in the same boat here that you are in chat, that I'm not saying drop out either at all. If you're in school and you got school, fantastic, right? But for some folks, if they're struggling, things like that, like it's harder, but it's doable. That's what I'm saying, right? So anyway, and actually, Joe, I didn't know that about you. I had no idea. You taught high school math? Really? He's nodding.
I studied to teach high school math. I went to college for 2 years and just got sick of school. And I worked at a Radio Shack and ultimately got in computers from working at a Radio Shack.
It feels crazy talking about Radio Shack, because it completely ages us, because like this is probably for a lot of, yeah, exactly, Paul. Yeah, that's my point. That makes me feel super, super old.
That movie, when I worked, it's that show in Stranger Things. If that helps.
That's about right. When I worked in the mall, I worked at a software store that's across the hall from Radio Shack, and I wish I wanted to work at Radio Shack so bad, because that's where the cool people were. I was not cool. Oh, basic at TRSA level 2. Oh,
exactly where I learned it too.
You're hitting my heart here, because I got my Coco still in the basement. I never was cool enough to have like one of the TRSA models. I had the Coco. Hit my heart though. I definitely wanted one of those. Okay, so all right, you guys don't have to look at any more pictures of me, because honestly, it's making myself sick here. Anyway, so how have others done it? I know other people who have done things that are kind of similar, right? Or they have done the bug bounties. I talk about the bug bounties, right? They have made a decent living, not gonna lie, a decent living, like just doing bug bounties, because you get paid out in cash sometimes, or like, wire transfers, and they're doing that and making like, 2K here, 3K there. You got to have some knowledge under your belt doing that. But they were able to take that and turn that into a career later at a company, going, I've got knowledge and ability to do this because I was able to get these payouts. Like I'm consistently doing this, and then we get hired, right? I know a lot of folks who are able to get into security by working somewhere else in the organization that has nothing to do with security, but because they're doing something really similar, like people I know who worked in finance who happen to be like accounts payable, and they're auditing accounts payable. Well, that mindset totally transferable, because what are you doing? You're looking for bad guys doing the wrong thing, right? So think about, if you're working somewhere already, what you're doing that could get you over there, that is a similar mindset that you could learn how to like take that knowledge and twist it, right? A lot of it, honestly, taking a person, or like knowing a person knows a person. Almost every job I have, try this, actually might be literally every job I have, except for the mall job. Every job I have except for the mall job was because I knew someone who was there, who told me about the company, and either was helped to get me in, or just told me enough to maybe want to apply, right? Your network is humongous. And I know we talk about that a lot, but like you don't really realize it till you look back in your career, like 30 years of your career, and go like, dang, if it wasn't for my network, like I don't know where I would be, right? A lot of times people get in through like finding a small company. It's a lot easier sometimes to get into it through a small company that just needs a guy. I need a security person, or I need an IT, I need a nerd. A lot of times I need a nerd. If you walk in there and be that nerd, even if you don't know that much stuff, you know more than they do, good enough. Learn on the job. They're paying you to learn on the job. I'll tell you the things that don't work. Breaking it, like using your skills to hack a company. I know that actually that's not like something you see on TV, like, oh, they hacked into the system, so they offered them a job. It doesn't happen in real life. You hack into a system, you go to jail. That does not give you street cred. That gives you a rap, right? Or stalking. Stalking doesn't help either, I will say. But those other things do work. Those things don't work. So, all right. So how do you get there? So, like I talked about at the beginning, right? A lot of it is around finding out what you like and what you don't like. But I want to repeat that, because a lot of times it's hard to remember here. Figure out what you like. So when you're doing your reading, because you're going to be reading about a lot of this stuff, right? You're listening to podcasts, whatever you're going to be doing, right? You're going to hit a word. You're like, I don't know what that word means. And you go looking up that word, you've been on Wikipedia, you look up that word. You go scrolling down, you go like, you're going to find a word in the description of the other word. You go like, I don't know what that means. You can do that. You end up down the rabbit hole, and eventually you find yourself like going back up. You find another word, go back down, go back up. You would be amazed at how much it is based on that. Now, granted, the world we live in isn't always like book knowledge, right? But it's amazing how much you end up learning ancillary-wise just based on that, right? But the other big one, the huge one, is figuring out what you don't like. And I mention this a lot to folks who are just starting the career. So a big part of what we do is passion. If it's something you don't like doing, you're not going to want to do it. And in fact, you're probably going to stop doing security. You're like, oh, this sucks. And yeah, you're right. It does suck. If you don't like doing it, it's not good. So figure out what it is, those things that you don't like. Like I'll admit, like for what I do for a living, I've been doing this for 30 years. If someone put me in a job where I had to do programming, sorry, Joe, if I had to do programming, I would quit. I hate it. I have ADHD. I can't sit around and program that long. There is no benefit the amount of time I spend. If I get it, like I write something for 2 hours, I hit error, I get frustrated. I don't want to troubleshoot it. Like that is heck for me. I'm not going to swear. That is loud. That sucks, right? Figure out what those things are for you and don't do those things. There is enough specialization in security that you don't have to do the things you don't like. But a lot of it also, stay up to date. Security changes all the time. I mentioned at the beginning, right, about the stuff going on in Eastern Europe. The world changes constantly in security, but when I say it changes constantly, it also means that attack methods change. The way the bad guy is getting in changes, like literally almost every day. You cannot get bored in what we do. It's like the biggest crazy chess game on the planet. You can't get bored. There's too much going on. Because remember this. So when I started, all of this fell into, you did security, right? It is specialized so much in the time I've been in security that you can make a really good living by taking any one of these things and specializing in it only. Or you can be like me and be a generalist. There didn't used to be specialization, but now there's a lot of specialization. So figure out the things that look really interesting and do the reading stuff and go like, yeah, I like this. I don't like this. And stay away from the things you don't like. And that helps you out a bunch. So employers, what are they looking for in general? The biggest one I'm going to say is passion. And I know it sounds dorky, and I know it may not even make sense in a lot of ways. That is a big one, right? I will say for a lot of folks like who bounce between IT and security, a lot of folks, if you're not really into it, they'll bounce back to IT because IT doesn't change as much. But for folks who are in security, who love it, they're all in. Because like I said, things change so much. You are influencing the company in ways that are crazy. And the crazy part is we all have heard about like big hacks, Equifax, and all these other ones over the past couple of years, right? The big, like this one made the news like a couple weeks ago about Log4j, it's called, or PwnKit. Like these are making like the national news. For a lot of companies, the risk in dollars associated with security is the highest risk in the organization. I'm not joking. With like compared to like liquidity risk, things like that. Like when you are in security, you are handling the biggest risk in the company as far as like if they were to get hacked. When you talk about fines and judgments and recovery costs and reputation damage, things like that, adds up to the largest risk in the org. So there's a lot to it, right? And so the passion, you get sucked into it, whether you want to or not, you get sucked in, right? A lot of it's humility. Being able to say, I don't know, is one of the biggest parts here because you can't know everything because there is too much to know. If you're looking at this again, there is too much to know. Admitting you say, I don't know is huge. Also be a sponge. You're gonna be around people who know stuff, who may new things you don't know. It's okay to not know it, just be a sponge. Being big on training because things change a lot, that's huge. Communication. A lot of people miss this one in security and don't realize what a big deal this is. Even for people who are doing penetration testing, who are like hacking things all day and breaking into things, half their time is not breaking into things, it's writing the reports. It's emailing people. It's being able to take what they did in 5 minutes and turn that into something to explain to, let's say, the developer or something, and be able to describe to them what they did, because they're a nerd doing hacking. The people that they're trying to describe what they did to are nerds who don't do hacking. They're nerds about something else. The hacker has to be able to describe what they did to, let's say, the developer to explain how they broke into the application so the developer can fix it. Communication is humongous. You can't just take the hoodie and put it over your face and not talk to anybody. Sorry, it's not how it works, right? Or certifications. I'm putting the question mark there as far as what employers are looking for. We're in a weird world right now where it used to be 10 years ago, you had to have like, a list of like, you had to have the alphabet after your name of all these certifications, of all these things, a lot of it, and like I mentioned, the whole like 2 jobs to every security person, a lot of companies are realizing like, oh, a lot of times what a certification means is that they know how to take a test well. It doesn't mean they know things. It just means they know how to take a test. And so a lot of employers are dropping the certification requirement for practical knowledge, ability, passion, stuff like that. And so I'm not saying don't get the certs. What I'm saying is they don't carry the weight they used to, or what I can say is get them. But the best part about a certification half the time is the bibliography and the study guide, not the certification itself. There's one, like for example, called the CISSP. I can't, Certified Information Security Professional. That's what it stands for. I took it like 10 years ago. I got it just because I told myself I wanted to get it back in like the late 90s. So I got it. Did nothing for me. But what it did do for me is in the process of studying it, the bibliography at the end of the study guide was like 900 pages long. The bibliography was phenomenal. And I learned more from the ancillary stuff that had nothing to do with the test than studying for the test. That's where you get your value on certification, is that part. But for the employer, a lot of times they want to see the letters. But for you, yeah, you got the letters to get you in the door. But if you do all the other stuff, oh, you're a rock star when you walk in the door. You're a total rock star. So, okay. So real quick, I know what I do day to day. So I know I've been talking for a half an hour and you're probably already very, very tired of listening to me. What I do day to day. So I'm a leader of leaders. So I do email for now, right? And my off time, I do other stuff. But what I did when I was a technical person, right? I came in, I've done different parts here. So I did the consulting side, right? So I went to, at the time, got on a plane, fly to a customer on a Monday, and they would have a very specific need. I would go in there and either configure software for them or sit down and consult with them and like, we're having this issue. We need to figure out what is the best way to address this problem that we can't figure out ourselves within our organization, or we have the software to do it, but we don't have to configure it to actually do the thing we want to do. So we just keep on like wasting time and money and helping them walk through that. When I came to Quicken Loans, I was doing that. I was also looking for the bad guy. So when I say looking for the bad guy, there is software that will take in, like you probably know, right? If you got a PC at home, there are what are called log events on there. And it logs everything you're doing, as not in a creepy way, but more like, like you printed this document, you logged in, you logged out, you did this thing, you ran this program, stuff like that with timestamps. So when I say log events, like if let's say you've got 20,000 laptops at a company, right? Every single one of those laptops sending their logs to one central location. You've got hundreds of servers all sending their logs to one central location. All the applications sending all their logs to one central location. So in that, you will get quite literally millions of logs per day, sometimes billions of logs per day. I was not sitting there scrolling through billions of logs. There was software that helped figure out the things that probably looked the most likely that was weird. And I would spend the time actually looking to see like, okay, is this legit? Is this not? Is this bad? Should I dig in deeper into other logs to figure out how they correlate together, stuff like that? That's part of what I did. I also did architecture. So in architecture, this is like a different version of consulting. I'm consulting to the business, but big picture thought items of like, we're trying to figure out how to get encryption to work across these, 15 applications. What's the right way of doing that? Or we need to figure out authentication. Authentication being like, when you log in with username and password, we need to figure out how authentication as a concept should work across all of our applications, not just this one, like these big picture things. I did a lot of that, right? So my day-to-day was a lot of meetings, which I loved, which is weird. Again, I'm shy, but I can put on the mask. I can play the game, right? But I love fixing the things and making people happy. And I love that feeling of like when it all works together and it feels so good. The talking to people part is hard, but I love the tech part and how I'm marrying the two. That was my life on a day-to-day, all through that, right? Everything from when I was working, as a consultant, traveling to startups, all that with different versions of that. But if you look at that map, a lot of people do other things that have nothing to do with those things at all, but they all connect together. Because for architecture and design, you need the authentication. Who's setting up that authentication? Probably a security person. Well, when that authentication happens, someone logs in, it generates a log saying so-and-so logged in. Well, that goes to the log system that other people are looking at to look at those logs to see if that is that person that logged in, or is that the right person? It says, like, I know this person lives in the US, but they're logging in from Nigeria. That might not be this person, right? So that all kind of ties together into one big soup, right? So what are the things you can do right now right? Before you even like know what you're doing, anything else, what are some of the things you can do right now? Get out there. We talked about your network, right? When I'm talking about get out there, I mean get out there and like talk to people. If you're not on LinkedIn and using it regularly, use LinkedIn is a humongous one, right? And you don't have to know stuff. There's a feed, right? Reply to people, respond to people, show what you know, things like that. Don't just hide and hope magic will happen. When you're early in your career, it's all about relationships. Because that's the only because you're trying to compete against a bunch of other people who also have a blank resume. So know people, get to know them, get them to like you. But the biggest part, be valuable. It's not a matter of like, hey, happy birthday, whatever else. How can you be valuable to them? How can you help other people? Do you have information somewhere that other people might want to know? Forward over articles, things like that. And part of it is in really building your brand. So even if you feel like, yeah, I don't know anything yet, right? If you know how to find things that other people might find valuable, they will recognize you as someone who recognizes what's valuable as a thinker. That alone is humongous. Again, like mentioned, start talking to people, right? Digging deep. We talked about that, right? Find a term, go deep, figure out, like, go into the hole, come back up, stuff like that. That's the stuff you can do right now. You got the internet, right? Like, go on Wikipedia, find some web pages, find some things, find things you don't know, figure out the stuff that looks really interesting, figure out the stuff that looks like crap that is not interesting, and keep going deep. Follow security sources. I'm going to give you the very, like the beginning ones at the very end. There's like thousands of them, right? I'll give you a bunch at the very end slide, right? Passion, passion, passion. A lot of us work in a full-time job. A lot of us are going to school full-time. A lot of stuff, we got a lot of things we have going on, right? So it's not a matter of what you're doing between 9 and 5. A lot of times what you're doing from 7 to midnight, right? And for any of you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, so he talks about for his side hustles, right? Same thing, right? What are you doing between 7 and midnight? What are you doing 7 and 2 a.m., right? I'm not saying spend every minute of your day doing this stuff. It will burn you out. But I'm saying figure out the things that make you super excited and go deep on those things, and just don't give up on that passion side, because that's what's going to get you in the door. So to wrap up, those are the things, right, that I can talk about security. And I'm giving you like a broad overview, right? There's so much there and stuff to talk about. But I want to talk about questions, but I'm also going to say, let's talk about questions, because I am more than happy to rapid fire them at me, or Joe, or anybody, right? But I want to leave this up so you can look at it. That way you're not looking at me, because this looks way better than I look like, right? Some basics. These are some of the places to start. I'm not saying this, there's so much there. On these sites, sans.org is like probably the site for training information. There's so much there that's free. Krebs on security is humongous. Like, you want to know what's going on in the security underground? Krebs, who's been doing this for like 10 years now, he's got links into all that stuff. Hacker News, Dark Reading. I'm mentioning 2 podcasts. There's some of the 2 that I listen to. There's about 50 good ones out there. Oh, I forgot to, I can't edit it right now. Another really good one called Darknet Diaries. I forgot to put that on there, but Darknet Diaries is a weekly or bi-weekly one that talks about the hacking underground and all these really cool stories about like these big major hacks and the people who are behind them and involved. For training, sans.org again, blackhillsinfosec.com, there's a bunch of other places. If you're not familiar with or don't realize, almost all security stuff happens on Twitter. Twitter is where like all the security people went. Like, you're not going to find a whole lot good on Facebook, TikTok, like you're not going to find any of that. It's all happening on Twitter. Here are some of the folks. And what you do is from here, start looking at who's replying to who, because everyone's all talking to each other. So once you find the first like 6 within like probably a day, you're probably gonna have like 70 people you're following. And from that 70, you're gonna have like another 200 you're following. These is a good place to start. So that said, I have nothing else to say on this, but I am more than happy to take any questions, talk about anything. This is the part that, in my opinion, way more valuable than anything I just, like the past 40 minutes are a wash. Everything after this, more valuable. But thank you. That's my big part too. Thank you. What you got?
Thank you so much, John. Well, just real quick, what is the community on Twitter? Is it Cyber Twitter, or what's the cybersecurity community name on Twitter?
There isn't really a name for it. When I talk about it, it's just like, it's everybody who like does security just ends up on security. So there isn't like a group necessarily. It's more like once you find the first couple people, you see who's talking to who, and you end up just following all of them.
Well, thank you for sharing this. I know this is something that they've all been needing and wanting for the past a week, 2 weeks now. So I appreciate that. So
we can, best for last.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, yes, this is gold for everyone. Let's open it up to questions. Does anyone have questions? If you do, just unmute yourself.
Plus, there's no such thing as a dumb question. None at all.
I know you guys have questions.
Okay. I know you just said there's no such thing as a dumb question, but I feel like this is a really dumb question. Okay,
Nope.
so as somebody who's never held like a job before and wants to get into this, what is like the most entry level position that you think would be like ideal? And like where? Sorry, where, like what company, I guess, would you say?
So I would say if you've never had a job, you're starting from the very beginning. There's a lot to be said for Geek Squad at Best Buy. As dumb as it sounds, but I mean, if you're already a bit of a nerd, and you know like enough to be dangerous, Geek Squad is huge because that's like a good foot in the door that shows like, okay, I know some stuff, right? And that can get you into, let's say, the help desk of a company, and from help desk you can pivot to security. I would definitely say that like any place you can do any kind of help desk type work, because once you're on the technical side, bouncing to security becomes super simple. If you're looking to get your foot in on the very first job, a lot of things we talked about, like of just, learning that stuff and all that, like there are a lot of folks I know who were able to pivot into stuff. And I'm not talking like back in my day. When I say back in my day, like I sound like I'm super old, which I'm not, but I mean, I'm not talking about back then, but even like recently, we're able to pivot into a decent job at like 17 or 18, just by building the cred of just knowing stuff, right? I'm not saying fake it till you make it. I'm not saying that. But just being able to get that information together and just kind of talking to people on LinkedIn and stuff like that, it's amazing how much just building the community and building your network at the very beginning will turn into someone saying, hey, you want a job? Or just saying, hey, do you have anything available? And just asking. It's just, it's the
Thank you
hard
so
one though,
much.
because no problem. It's just, that's the hardest one I know, because as someone who is like socially awkward, I hate suggesting, because I know how hard it is for me to do that kind of stuff, but it's invaluable, honestly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
He broke the seal. It's got to be more.
Gordon?
On the note of being socially awkward for this stuff, how would you recommend for just like those types of people who are more introverted and really wanting to network? Because I know everyone, that's been the common factor of everything that we've been hearing for the past 2 weeks is just network. And it's like, that doesn't come easy to me.
So I would say, I'm with you, play to your strengths. I know, because there are networking events I have been to. As a leader, I've been to them sometimes where it's like, a room full of people that I've never met. And they're like, yo, go ahead and go talk to people. And what I do is I walk in, I scan the room, see if I know anybody, and I walk right out. Like I admit I'm one of those people. However, I'm much stronger on places like, because I mean, a lot of us are internet native, right? I'm not internet native, I'm BBS native, which is the pre-internet, right? Of just typing to people. That LinkedIn is like the place for introverts because no one can see you, right? You can be as chatty as you want to be without that like weird awkwardness of talking back and forth. LinkedIn is huge for that, right? Also, if you are okay with doing like talking stuff, Clubhouse is huge too. I know Clubhouse is not as big as it was during COVID, but if you can find some good areas of Clubhouse to kind of jump in, it gives you a good place to listen in, follow people, or if you know just enough to be dangerous, kind of jump in and talk about stuff. But I know for me, I know everyone's not that same way. I'm the most awkward face to face. But if people can't see me, something like a Clubhouse or like on social media, I'm strongest. And that might be your big thing, right? Network there and then be able to, get a face to face with someone that later on, like if you get to know them for a while or something like that. I don't know if that helps. Maybe.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
No problem.
Emilio?
I know you talked a lot about how you kind of went from hustling and you got a job at like Quicken Loans. What was the hiring process for Quicken Loans in terms of like interviews or like applications?
Ooh, that's good. Okay. Now, granted, Quicken Loans was like a little bit later in my career, but the process was, I'm trying to remember this a little while ago. Typically, depending on the company, they'll do one of two things. Either they will do a phone screen, which is usually like a half an hour to 45 minutes to check on like Are you who you say they are, or who you say you are? Do you sound like an axe murderer? You know, like things like that, right? Like kind of the basics, kind of like get a feel for your knowledge. Are you puffing yourself up? Are you being truthful? And a lot of times with a lot of companies, that's where they try to see if you're a culture fit. And that's where they try to like figure out, does your resume match who you actually are, right? Then from there, what happened at Quicken Loans was about an hour and a half long meeting. It wasn't super long. It was with me, the person who became my leader, and a peer leader, like from elsewhere in the organization. And it was about an hour and a half of us just sitting around, but the three of us, like 3 chairs, talking and kind of, you know, asking some questions about my past, things I've done, some experiential things like, well, tell us about a time when you had a challenge like X. And that's been like a lot more norms I've been seeing with the interview questions of people say, tell us about a time when, as opposed to like hitting me up on like very specific questions. However, if you're earlier in your career, what they will likely end up doing is asking questions that are very, very targeted and specific to know like where your technical knowledge is or where it isn't, and that they can engage that. Or some companies will use something like HackerRank is a software that does it, some others, where they have you go to a website first before you even talk to anybody, and that will judge your technical skills before you go into the interview. And that way they can kind of review that and see, you know, how strong you are and things like that. So that was my experience. I have talked to people who worked gone to other companies where they've done a phone screen, a face-to-face, and then another face-to-face later on. There's like 6 hours long with a bunch of different people across the org with rapid fire questions. And then another person is a different type of thing to really kind of vet who you are with the intent of like, okay, figuring like, okay, after 3 hours, does the person break down? Like, and then you kind of start to see where these things are. A lot of companies don't go through that. They kind of figure out, well, one, you know, we need people, so it doesn't make sense to torture them. But also they figure out like, you probably can figure out who they are after about 60 to 90 minutes. That, you know, if you tack on extra 5 hours, you wouldn't know that much more. Like really the whole 80-20 rule, like your 80% is gonna be the first hour. And then like the value tails off after, you know, that of like, you know, yeah, we had him here for 5 hours, but we knew we were going to hire him in the first 40 minutes. So why do we do all this? That is what the processes look like a lot of companies. After that, typically then they will ask you, they won't ask you this, but usually early in the process, before you even talk to people, they ask about like, what do you want for salary? You know, anything you want, or like, where did you work? How much did you make at your last job? Stuff like that. When they decide, I'm going to be optimistic, when they decide, yeah, we love you, then it won't be the people who you talk to, it'll be the recruiter, who's kind of like the intermediary between you and them, will ask you, well, how much you want to make? And there'll be that negotiation of like the pay. Once you get that nailed down, then they will do a background check to make sure that you don't have anything in your background that's really concerning, stuff like that. Some companies will also do a social media check to make sure that, you know, where you are coming from aligns with who you are. They wouldn't ask you for what your logins are, but a lot of times it's not too hard to, I mean, we work in security, right? We know it's not that hard to match a person's email address up against all their other accounts. So it doesn't take that much work, but sometimes they'll do a social media check to make sure that, you know, you're not, you know, nuts. And then after that, they will offer you the job, and then you got to sign some papers and show up the next day. So that's a basic gist. I'm not going to mention, like, I can't say exactly what Quicken Loans does right now because when you know what they do right now, because I don't really know fully. Haven't started here in 15 years, right? But I know some of those checks weren't there when I started. Mine was a little more streamlined, but the world's different now, right? Does that help?
We added
Yes, it
them.
does. Thank you for the insight.
Oh, what's that, Joe?
We added all those checks as a result of hiring you. So.
Oh, yeah, I ruined everything for everybody. So sorry.
One other thing I want to add to that is it's slightly different for our internship program. You don't have to go through the same thing. What John was talking about was more so our, you know, full-time or even part-time process, even though we don't really do much part-time. For our internship program, we generally have one big one, but we do 2 smaller ones. So we have a big summer internship program that generally we start having the conversations like now with people, and it's usually a half-hour-ish phone screen or video through Teams or Zoom. And they bring you on board for a fixed duration internship that's fully paid. Not much else happens with it. Might be a background check, but it's nowhere near at the same background check for that. And it's also a good way to get on board at a place at Rocket Mortgage slash Quicken Loans, because you already have your foot in the door. You get to show what you're doing. You get to start building up that resume and the knowledge for when you're done with school to be able to be brought on board. The next question.
Calvin?
Yeah, John, you mentioned the social media check just now. So I was wondering, so if you don't really use social media or have an account, is that like an instant knock against you if they can't really find anything on you?
No, not that I've seen. At least it's usually when they check, it's more to make sure that you would be a good representation of the company. It's more checking for like really negative, like big red flags, like, are you, bragging about hurting people and things like that. Like, but if you don't have something, no, not at all. Like I said, they're checking for the negatives. That's it.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the presentation, guys.
You're
So
welcome.
I was wondering, you mentioned a lot of different tools to be able to tools and resources to be able to learn the industry and get into the industry and everything. There's a multitude of different resources that I've come across. What do you find are the type of tools to use to be able to, I guess, hone in and study onto things? Is it just based on personality style, learning style, or is there a particular best path to be able to understand technology pretty much?
Oh, yikes. That's a big one. So I would say I hate to be a lawyer and say it depends, but it depends, right? Because it depends on the thing that you're really interested in. Like, as an example, I didn't put it up there, but I'll put it here in the chat. So there's something called Security Onion, for example, and I think it's securityonion.com. If you are already doing computery stuff and you're really interested in like seeing like how to do the defense, Security Onion is a software. It's a CD you can install on a machine, and you set up like on your basically off of your wireless router, your cable router, to like watch things coming in and watch attacks that are coming. Like if you're on the internet, you're getting attacked all day anyway, whether you want to be or not, right? So that's that's one way. If you're more interested in like learning the bits and pieces, there are things like I mentioned, like SANS.org, which is both a research center but also a school. But they have a lot of people's like research projects available for free. You can just download and grab. There's a lot of reading there, right? I think it really depends on the thing you're interested in and your style. For a lot of people, they're more experiential. So it's more like, I want to touch and feel the things and work on them because I love tech and I love doing the thing. Something like Security Onion, huge. Other people go, I need to kind of know what I'm doing. I kind of need to understand the bits and pieces first before I jump in. And that's where like the reading would help. I'm not going to keep on like touting SANS. I think that's one of the better examples there, because they've just got the most to work with. And that's the greatest place, I think, is a jumping off point of like, you don't have to spend much time on that site, but you might find other things like, oh, interesting. But the other part too, and you'll see this as you start really digging into security Twitter, is there are so many people who write like side projects and things like that. And you can go to their websites or to GitHub, which is where these code repositories are, and download and just like start messing with these tools all the time. There's a company called TrustedSec, for example, who, and I'm not advocating for them, I'm just saying this, but they're a company out there who's kind of like known in the security community. And they have a big presence both on Twitter, but also on GitHub of a lot of their stuff, because something called the social engineering toolkit they make. This software they write for, like, if you want to do social engineering. Social engineering, for if you're not familiar with it, is using the person to hack in, as in voice, basically hacking humans effectively through other humans. And so they've got these toolkits for being able to things like, fooling people and going to websites that they don't mean to go to, that's got like malware on it, so they can get on their machine, stuff like that, right? And so as you're poking around on Twitter, you're going to find more stuff and more projects, and you might want to play with them there. So there isn't a cut and dry way of actually getting there. It's just kind of finding the thing you like to do best and understanding your own personality.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joe, for adding that in the chat too.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Well, I hear none. I usually say at the end, ask the question, if you were an extern in their shoe, what would you do right now? Considering that all of them are almost preparing for the workforce soon or in the near future.
Yeah. Whew. Okay, I might need Joe's help on this one. So
based on the day, probably head to Mill Avenue to catch up on the rest of the St. Patrick's Day celebration.
Exactly. You're right. Oh, let's see. I think it goes back to the one slide. I'll go back to it because in my mind, it is really, a lot of it is that, today, now, those are some of the biggest things of just, how to jump in there. If you're starting off or you're changing careers, I don't think any of this changes, right? It's just like a little bit different because if you're changing careers, you already kind of know how to get your foot in the door. If you're brand new and starting your career, you don't know how to do that yet. But a lot of it is still going to be feet to the street, getting to know people, and understanding that there are so many opportunities out there and you can't get discouraged by it, by like if the first one or two things you're trying don't work, right? Again, in security, there are 2 jobs per person, 3 jobs per person in Europe, right? There is a desperate want for folks. It's just a matter of knowing enough to be dangerous, to be able to get your foot in the door by talking to the right people and blanketing with resumes, but remembering that if you're going to do that, that there's a lot of folks who are in the same position you are who are early in their career, and what is the thing that makes you stand out? What will make someone want to pick up that resume? And a lot's going to be like, what are those things that you're looking at, even though you don't have the job right now, but how are you contributing to the security community, and what security things are you doing, but you're just not working and getting paid for it? That will be the differentiator.
And I can't stress enough what John is saying. Building a brand and talking to people, you're already in the first step. You went outside of your classroom studies, or for people like Aaron that are, finding a second, third, fourth career, you're already taking the next step of doing something outside of just your traditional learning, meeting, your networking. You have a project together with the other externs. You're sitting here or standing here asking questions. That's the first step, really getting out there. You want to separate yourself because, like John was saying earlier, there could be, an average recruiter, especially here at Rocket, gets 200-300 resumes a day. What's going to set you apart is those connections internally here at Rocket, and I'm sure it's the same with a lot of other organizations. A recruiter might get 100 resumes a day, but if John or I send a resume to them, guess what? You move to the front of the stack with everyone else. It's like, this came as a recommendation from one of our fellow team members. He or she knows what we're like and everything. You have now a one more foot in the door than a basic resume. So that networking is important. You don't have to network face-to-face like this. Like a lot of engineers are introverts by nature. They have trouble in situations like this communicate. There's plenty of ways you can do it without a face. It could be just, writing your own blogs, participating in GitHub on open source projects, following and starting conversations on Twitter and Slack. There's lots of different ways to get out there and start building a name for yourself and building those relationships. I think 3 or 4 of you have already sent me LinkedIn requests over the last 2 weeks. So it's another way of doing it.
Awesome. Well, sorry, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, speaking of that, actually, I forgot. I'm going to throw my LinkedIn there as well. And I admit I have not been using it as much as I should because I've got a pretty busy day most days. But absolutely, feel free to use me and my network. Use me all you want. I'm more than happy to help out with that.
All right, I just added you.
Oh, cool. Yay.
That's
awesome.
You have at least one.
Okay. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and spending St. Patrick's Day with us. John, I think we could pinch you maybe, or are you wearing to?
You could, and I actually am Irish on top of it. You can't see it. I am one big freckle. I'm just covered in freckles.
That's awesome. So if everyone wants to unmute and say thank you, please do so.
Thank you
Thank
so
you both
much.
very much
For
for your time.
Thanks so
Oh,
much for your
much.
time.
John and Joey.
Thank you so much.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
guys.
Doesn't that make you smile?
It totally does. And
Are
thank
we
you so
gonna
much for
take
the
a-
chance.
Are we gonna take a
Oh,
picture?
yes. Can we take a picture?
Oh.
I totally forgot. This is like routine and I got messed up. Okay. Do you guys mind if we do?
Not
Go
at
for
all.
it.
Okay. You have to hold your smile for 30 seconds.
And smile at the camera.
Yes, that's one. I have to do another one because there's two screens. There it is.
This is
I did it,
hard.
guys. I'm sorry. I don't have a Mac, so it's not as easy. But thank you so much, John and Joji, and I'll see you, Joji, also very soon. But we really appreciate your time and have a good night.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Good luck,
Alright.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. How about we do maybe five minutes? Let's do 5 minutes and then we'll talk about when to end. So I'll see you in a bit.